From an enormous tornado that destroyed everything in its path, to massive earthquakes that have killed thousands of people, we take a look at 15 real natural disaster photos that will blow your mind. Number 15. Nepal earthquake in 2015. In 2015, two earthquakes shocked the world, the first one measuring a 7.3 on the Richter scale, and another shortly after measuring a 6.3. Approximately 95% of all homes and businesses in Nepal were destroyed in the earthquake. A tower that was over 180 years old was reduced to rubble, and the effects of the earthquake were felt as far away as Bangladesh, China, and some Indian countries. More than 3,500 injuries were reported and a total of 218 casualties. The worst part? This took place just a month after an even more devastating quake. Number 14. Indian Ocean quake in 2004. Just off the coast of Indonesia, an earthquake hit on Boxing Day 2004. In fact, it was the third largest measured earthquake ever recorded, coming in at a 9.1 to 9.3 on the Richter scale. This earthquake was so big that other earthquakes were triggered as far away as Alaska. It also triggered a major tsunami, which affected 14 different countries and took the lives of over 230,000 people. Many other countries from around the globe bonded together and donated up to $14 billion in humanitarian aid to help the victims and survivors of these terrible natural disasters. Number 13. Mount St. Helens eruption in 1980. In comparison, the earthquake that hit Washington state at 8:30 a.m. on May 18, 1980 was relatively small. It did weaken the north face of the mountain, which caused it to become one of the largest recorded landslides of our time. But a relatively small earthquake and a fairly large landslide aren't necessarily headline news. It's what happened as a result that got everybody talking. The underlying molten and gas-filled rock was exposed to lower pressure. This caused the volcano to erupt and send smoke and ash 80,000 feet into the air, covering 11 states. 57 people died as a result, and the eruption eventually caused billions in damages to the surrounding area. Number 12. TOHOKU earthquake and tsunami in 2011. Japan was devastated by a huge quake in March of 2011. It was the most powerful recorded earthquake to have ever hit Japan, measuring a 9.0 on the Richter scale. Reports claim the deaths of more than 15,000 people as a result of the ensuing tsunami. Over 200,000 people had to be put in temporary homes. Waves reached as high as 133 feet and came up to 5 miles inland. Perhaps the most memorable event globally as a result of this quake and tsunami was the meltdown of 3 nuclear reactors at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant. Number 11. Great HANSHIN quake in 1995. Earthquakes and tsunamis are a well-known threat to Japan, so it's no stranger to natural disasters. The Great HANSHIN earthquake was one of the most devastating quakes ever to hit Japan. In 1995, it took its toll mainly on the city of Kobe, decimating 120 docks and 150,000 buildings. Japan's disaster prevention authorities had to undergo a complete restructuring, as over 6,000 people lost their lives. As a result, new buildings were constructed that could take on bigger quakes, and both residents and authorities were better prepared for future disasters. Number 10. Chile earthquake in 2010. For approximately 3 minutes, Chile was rocked by an 8.8 earthquake just off the coast, which killed 525 people in 2010. It was, of course, felt by almost everyone in Chile, but at an 8.8 on the Richter scale, even people in Argentina felt the results. The aftershocks measured between 5.4 and 6.2, and those were within an hour of the first quake. After the first hour, there were many other minor quakes that happened throughout the entire southwest hemisphere. Like many other earthquakes, multiple tsunamis resulted, causing warnings to be issued in 53 countries. Number 9. Hurricane Katrina, 2005. The costliest and one of the deadliest storms in U.S. history, it's hard to forget about Hurricane Katrina. Over 1 million people were left without their homes, and at least 1,245 people died. Louisiana and Mississippi were two states that were hardest hit, but minor and moderate flooding were widespread. Minor floods were even reported as far north as Quebec, Canada. Tornadoes sprung up as far away as Pennsylvania, although none of them caused any significant damage. In the U.S.'s great time of need, multiple countries came together to donate aid in an effort to help clean and rebuild all the devastation caused by the storm. Number 8. Tornado outbreak in 2006. No, this is not a misprint, folks. 1,333 tornadoes were reported in the U.S. over the course of 2006. 67 people died as a result of these tornadoes. This particular picture was taken on August 24th, and it's one of 14 tornadoes on that day, 3 of which were in Minnesota alone. It traveled approximately 30 miles, caused $30 million in damages, and killed 1 person. Even the bravest human beings would be shaken by the sheer size of this torrent of wind. Over the 7-hour duration of this storm, tornadoes caused $130 million in damages across several states. Number 7. TOHOKU tsunami in 2011. When you purchase a houseboat, this is probably not what you have in mind. This damage was caused by the quake and tsunami in early 2011 in Japan. This house was found about 50 miles off the coast of Japan and was just one part of what the World Bank estimated at $235 billion in damages. This tsunami uprooted the lives of over 200,000 people and is the costliest disaster not just in Japan's history, but the world. Number 6. JOPLIN tornado in 2011. JOPLIN was hit by an EF5 tornado, one of the most powerful tornadoes there are. It was the deadliest tornado to hit the U.S. in 40 years. This gigantic storm was a mile wide and traveled a distance of about 20 miles, getting more and more intense as it moved. Almost 7,000 homes were completely destroyed in its path, and another 500 had more minor damage. Tornado warnings were issued just 20 minutes before the tornado hit, but many residents ignored the warnings. This caused 158 deaths and another 1,150 injuries. The damages cost close to $3 billion, making it Missouri's most expensive disaster in history. Number 5. Guatemala City sinkhole in 2010. In 2010, Guatemala City had a series of natural events. A tropical storm started on May 24th and lasted for 6 days. The day after the storm stopped, the Pacaya volcano erupted on the 27th. This unfortunate series of events, the constant rain, unsteady ground, leaking sewer pipes, the effects of all 3 led to a sinkhole about 100 feet deep and 65 feet wide. 15 people were killed, another 300 were at great risk, and the sinkhole took a 3-story factory with it. The hole has been filled in. Once the situation became more stable, residents and officials filled the hole back in. But I'm sure it goes without saying that this area is still at a high risk for unpredictable sinkholes. Number 4. Mount Pinatubo eruption in 1991. Located in the Philippines, Mount Pinatubo is covered in dense forest, and years of rainfall caused it to be heavily eroded. Other than that, not much was known about it before 1991. It wasn't very intimidating. The local population never had any trouble with it. But in June of 1991, it caused a sulfuric acid haze that coated the entire world. This was the second largest eruption of the entire 20th century. The effects of it were felt around the globe, as it even dropped the global temperature by 0.5 degrees Celsius. Number 3. Undersea volcano of Tonga in 2009. We know about plenty of volcanoes above sea level all over the world, but in addition to those, there are hundreds located below sea level. You can find one of these just off the coast of Hunga Tonga. Hunga Tonga is an uninhabited island and is part of the Tonga archipelago. From March 16th to the 21st in 2009, this volcano spewed ash and magma, causing the nearest island to be covered in smoke and ash. Although some plants and wildlife on the island were covered in ash, there were, thankfully, no deaths. Number 2. The 2015 Mount Everest avalanche. This picture is a screen cap from a video taken by one of the climbers who was camped on Mount Everest at the time of this devastating avalanche. Earlier in 2015, Nepal had been rocked by a huge earthquake, and this avalanche was the most devastating that Mount Everest had ever seen. 61 injuries and 24 reported deaths were caused by this avalanche. Many were stranded at higher elevations and had no way of getting down. It became the first time that no one climbed the mountain in spring in 41 years, as the mountain was closed to climbers for the spring season. Number 1. Volcanic storms in Chile, 2008. Here's one that's quite interesting. Do you know what it's called when there's a volcanic storm caused by the electrical charges in the rock, ash, and ice particles spewed by the eruption colliding to produce static charges? That was quite a mouthful, so I'll give you a second. It's known as a dirty thunderstorm, which makes quite a lot of sense when you see the results. This eruption didn't result in any deaths. What it did do was coat areas of Chile and Argentina with so much ash that it could have caused long-lasting negative effects on agriculture. It left certain areas open to landslides caused by pyroclastic material, rocks, and water. While we don't necessarily know exactly what all that means, it sure does sound like a dirty thunderstorm.